are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, March 15th, 2017. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the four-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Angela Nagle, writer for The Baffler, Jacobin, Irish Times, on the enemies of the people. Also on the program today, Republicans try and care meltdown, the CBO, OMB, the SAM, all criticize. Next up,
Snow Day did you well.
It did. Next up, they pivot to just sabotaging the ACA. But there is a silver lining in the try and care numbers. It saves Social Security money because more of you will die before retirement. That's not a joke. Question is, will Republicans in the Senate bust their rules to save their bill? I can answer that, no. Meanwhile, massive town halls last weekend versus try and care. And Trump continues his assault on government agencies. Meanwhile, Secretary of Defense Mattis not allowed to choose his own undersecretary.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
And Secretary of State Tillerson had a climate change sock puppet email. This is normal. Whenever you're going to discuss sensitive things like climate change, you always got to have a separate email address. No word yet on... I'm not going to go there. Monica Crowley rebounds. And...
In a very, very fitting way.
The Energy Department has one less member of its beachhead. And hopefully we'll have one less congressman from Iowa. And lastly, Trump's 2005 tax forms revealed to some...
sort of overhyped.
Yeah. And Comey reportedly heading to the Senate to inform the Senate Intelligence Committee whether or not there is an investigation into Russia and Trump's relationship with Russia. Unclear. That was supposed to happen, we were supposed to know that right now, weren't we, Matt? Matt?
So both.
He's still with us?
I don't know when
we were supposed to know that right now about Comey.
What time in the day? I mean, people have been saying he's going to say something today.
Okay, I wasn't clear if that was going to happen. All right. He doesn't know everything. That's the first time I've ever stumped him. I mean...
Put it on high speed for me.
I guess White House said that Comey might confirm Russian investigation today. I do know that Grassley was saying yesterday, I think it was, that they were not going to confirm the Justice Department's number 2 until Comey briefs the Senate. And it's the question is, how much of a briefing will Comey give? It'll be interesting to find out because I think one theory out there is that Comey's been reluctant to tell the House Intelligence Committee anything because he's afraid that Chairman Nunes will just run over to the White House and tell them. So who knows? But meanwhile, the big story, of course, is this repeal and replace Obamacare bill, which I think there is increasingly strong arguments that the plan from Speaker Ryan was this is going to go down in flames and let's get this over with. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off because we can't do this. And hopefully no one in our party or in the media will take note of the fact that we voted on this 50 plus times in the House to repeal, that we actually passed a repeal bill in 2015 through reconciliation, both from the House and the Senate, and was then vetoed by President Obama. Hopefully, Paul Ryan is thinking, no one will notice that we are completely craven and we're full of it from day one, and we'll repeat that over and over and over again to our voters. Hopefully, most of the people in the Beltway media will never really talk about it too much. But here's Paul Ryan. He was with Fox's Brett Baier Monday night. And we're going to dig into this later in the program, but the Congressional Budget Office, which is a nonpartisan, basically numbers crunchers, if you will, came out with a report that 24 million people will lose their health insurance by 2020, 14 million by 2018. And yes, indeed, a feature, not a bug. And if you doubt those numbers, the White House, the Office of Budget Management, headed by Mick Mulvaney, former co-chair of the Freedom Caucus in the House, their numbers were a little bit different. They estimated 26 million people losing their health insurance by 2020. But here's Paul Ryan playing it off. I think this is a guy who looks like to me, maybe we pass this thing in the House, then we blame the Senate. Senate not as accountable. They all have their different reasons that will work for them in 2018. And then we can go on to just, cutting taxes the old-fashioned way.
They actually, frankly, encourage. Even CBO was telling us, we stabilize the market, we lower premiums, it lowers the deficit, it saves money. And more importantly, of course, they're going to say, if we're going to stop forcing people to buy something they don't want to buy, they're not going to buy it.
Okay.
That's why you have those uninsured numbers, which we all expected.
Mr. Speaker, if you're encouraged by this CBO report, what's a CBO report you're discouraged by?
Oh, I've seen a lot. I've been reading them all half my life.
Yeah.
But the point I'm saying is what CBO did was they validated. We are block granting Medicaid back to the states, saving $880 billion right there. This is an $883 billion tax cut for families and small businesses that helps lower their health care costs. And it saves money and reduces the deficit. So that's really good on all those points.
Now, first of all, I love the fact that he's like, I've been doing this for half my life. I've been reading CBO reports.
I've been trying to destroy poor people's health coverage for half my life.
And I'm not convinced that he doesn't read CBO reports like Mila doesn't read the stuff she's reading.
I did the reading.
30 minutes reading.
Did the reading.
Done.
Chalk it.
But listen to what he just said. $880 billion worth of cuts, to Medicare. $883 billion worth of tax cuts. That's interesting. Those numbers are so close to each other. Yes, they basically deny millions of people, 24 million, 26, depending on if you use the White House or the CBO numbers, health care, and then they're able to provide all of these cuts to these small businesses and mom and pop folk who weirdly didn't have any taxes associated with the rise, with the development of Obamacare. Everybody knows that the vast majority of those goes to people making over $200,000 or $250,000 as a couple.
Backbone of the country.
And then, in fact, it's actually even the vast, the largest piece of the pie goes to people making, I don't even know what the numbers are, but it's like 0.01% of the population. But that aside, the idea that premiums go down is true several years out because all the people who would be paying the higher premiums, the premiums are so much higher that they can't afford it. So they just leave the market. It is, to use my belabored metaphor about a car without an engine. They're going to keep selling this car without an engine for long enough so that everybody who needs an engine in their car leaves the market. And then they can get rid of the hood and the entire front part of the car and just sell those, and it'll be cheaper.
It's called freedom. That's when Paul Ryan really does start to sound like someone that would just call this show.
The people who are going to save money on this are people who are age 35, living either in a rural or urban environment, making over $54,000 a year. Everybody else loses. But if you're in that sweet spot and you can stay there for an extended period of time, like, I don't know, cryogenically freeze yourself.
Yeah, you can stay 35.
I would recommend
Yes.
you de-age
20 years.
yourself and hit the income sweet spot, and it'll work out well for you. You know, I've been reading CBO reports and creating active fantasy life for over half of my
Right.
political career.
He's been writing CBO fan fiction. All right, we're going to take a break. Oh, yeah, before we get there. Well, this is also funny. This is not, I don't know. You know, Paul Ryan's got a very funny show. Maybe he can get a show on CISO.
The Adventures of a Sociopath Cheesehead.
You don't want to let the air out of the tire. Let it percolate a little bit so he can go through development. But CISO's got a new show. This guy, Dan Baltz, he was like a Canadian. He's a Canadian.
He's a rising. He's the Dan Aykroyd of the 21st century.
Meet David, smart, jobless, and $500,000 in debt.
Not going to do well in the Ryan plan.
Not going to do well in the Ryan plan, particularly if he decides to age. Now David's decided to become a licensed clinical psychiatrist by conducting 1,920 hours worth of therapy sessions with patients he's met on Craigslist.
Ryan would use this as an example of someone who is actively working within the system to improve himself.
He's an entrepreneur. See if his plan works out on the new critically acclaimed series Shrink, streaming only on CISO. You've heard me talk about CISO before. I've been catching up on a lot of, frankly, British comedy that I'm not knocking American comedy. Just been there. With a wide array of handpicked and ad-free on-demand comedy, CISO is your one-stop comedy streaming service. You can watch Next Day Late Night, hilarious stand-up specials, and, of course, the binge-worthy classics, including 42 seasons of Saturday Night Live and the entire Monty Python catalog from the comfort of your favorite device. Plus, CISO has tons of great originals like the McElroy Brothers, My Brother, and Me, as well as an animated fantasy role-playing game starring Dan Harmon, and a fake reality show created by the geniuses behind Comedy Bang Bang and Reno 9/11. Access CISO anytime, anywhere on iOS, Android, Apple TV, and almost any other device, all for just, is it $20 a month? It's got to be closer to $20. No, $3.99 a month. No joke. So what are you waiting for? Just go to CISO.com. That's SEESO.com right now. Sign up for 1 month free with promo code MAJORITY at checkout. That's CISO.com, spelled SEESO.com, promo code MAJORITY, CISO.com, promo code MAJORITY. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we come back, we'll be talking to Angela Nagle.
Forgive the kids, for they don't know how to live. Rummy alleys, casually cruel.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. On the phone, Angela Nagle. She is a writer for Current Affairs and The Baffler. Angela, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So I wanted to talk to you about both about your piece, your most recent piece in The Baffler, about how hatred of the masses bridges our partisan divide. But I also want to talk to you a little bit about the alt-right, and it's sort of both these phenomena are playing out in at the moment. But this long term, I guess, you went back and you sort of dug into sort of how some of our literary giants on both sides of the Atlantic had a disdain for the masses. Just tell us about that.
Yeah, well, one of the main books that I drew a lot of the quotes from was a book by John Kerry called The Intellectuals and the Masses, which I read years ago. And it kind of had a huge effect on me. But I remember when I was reading it, it's very much about the literary intelligentsia in the early 20th century. And their ideas, like among all kinds of people that we admire, like W.B. Yeats, ideas about eugenics were very common and very fashionable. And even among, and that was a kind of a right to left thing, intellectuals at that time that were sort of fascist leaning, believed in this stuff, as did the kind of Fabian thinkers. So at that point, it was already something that kind of bridged the divide. But it was an idea that came about eugenics and all the connected ideas around, there being too many people. Carey kind of talks about how this was a result of this massive population boom that had happened, about 50 years beforehand. And those people were starting to kind of move into the elite urban centers and so on. So it just struck me as kind of relevant because I would view the alt-right as very much a phenomenon of a kind of panic that is particular to mass culture, which is a panic of, particularly cities being swarmed with these kind of breeding masses of people, the sense that we have limited resources, and that these people are having too many babies and are going to destroy our culture and all that kind of stuff. So in other words, even before you had the kind of mass immigration policies that we've had in recent decades, these kind of panics that were particular to mass culture have been around for quite a while.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, like, what differentiates the alt-right from just, Steve King, again, on multiple occasions, it seems like over the past 3 or 4 days, said something just almost exactly to that effect. A congressman from Iowa saying that we don't want to have to take care of other people's babies. And I don't know that I would call him the alt-right necessarily. He's just sort of like the old right, just the right. I mean, what is supposedly distinguishes the alt-right?
I suppose you could say it's the emboldened right in some way, emboldened far right, because up until pretty recently, what we call the right would include, say, neocons, for example, and it would include civic nationalists, people who would say, kind of very much like, I mean, Trump would be, to me, he still hangs on to that kind of civic nationalism. So he would say, it doesn't matter what color you are, we can all be united under the nation. And patriotism is what will kind of bring us all together. So there was always a pretense on the right of, particularly in America, there was the whole idea of American exceptionalism. So, the right in America, establishment right, has kind of generally valued all those things. I guess the alt-right is trying to break the taboo that has existed, particularly since the Holocaust, around issues of race. So since the horrors of the Holocaust, we've tended to speak about race with a great deal of, that kind of sense of taboo, that certain things were not sayable, that we shouldn't talk about sort of genetic superiority and inferiority and IQ and all those things. So their kind of main thing is trying to break that taboo and make all these things part of popular discussion again. And also a big part of their thinking is about kind of white consciousness. So trying to kind of reframe culture in a way that people think of themselves as white. Like in the same way that lots of successful movements in the past have tried to change people's consciousness. So, gay liberation movement, brought about, people thinking of themselves first and foremost as gay. The women's liberation movement, the same thing. They were very successful. So, I mean, that is kind of part of one of the very clever strategic parts of their project.
So, in other words, this is not your daddy's racism. It's basically, and I want to put a pin in that for one moment. I just got to address the civic nationalism of Trump. My sense is to the extent that he is, that is simply a rhetorical change. I mean, this guy, I think, had there's a lot to indicate that he was just, a classic, racist, and whether that was he was a Queens born and bred style racist or a wealthy racist. I mean, I think maybe there's an interesting sort of confluence there of his racism, but I think that's. I think the civic nationalism was just like sort of on some level, right? There's this. That civic nationalism is sort of the polite way to be racist, presumably. And if I hear you correctly, the alt-right is really just sort of like racist liberation on some level.
Yeah, it's absolutely rejecting the idea that you need any veneer of civic nationalism or anything else. So it's about being shocking and, it really is about breaking the taboo, and things that were just inconceivable in the public arena just a couple of years ago, I'm now seeing every day.
Right. Give an example of that, because I think that is really sort of it is really the case, and it's sort of, I wonder if it's sort of the last gasp of it's a classic white aggrievement, right? And almost you can see the mirror image with like something like RFRA, the Religious Freedom Act. Like you're inhibiting my practice of religion because you won't allow me to discriminate with it.
Yeah. Well, I guess particularly the comments of King, I think that just wouldn't have been possible, in recent decades. There was always a veneer over, even if a person on the right felt those things privately, someone else's baby, this incredibly dehumanizing stuff, and of course, before
I guess
it kind of came to the,
Jeff Sessions is a perfect example, right? I mean, this guy was too racist in 1980 under the Reagan era to be a judge, and now he's just racist enough to be our Department of to our Attorney General. I guess is a good example of that too.
Yeah. One of the things I also really liked about the kind of going back and looking at the kind of literary intelligentsia that had all these ideas about eugenics and kind of like often, were quite fascistic in their language. And, D.H. Lawrence, for example, wrote about his fantasy of like herding the unfit and the sick into some kind of a building. And, they would talk about like poison gas and all this kind of, like they really were kind of almost imagining the Holocaust before it happened, in these kind of fantasies. And they were responding, as I said, to a population boom and to this kind of chaos of what that meant, the big population boom, how it changed the cities. And they described their kind of disgust at, these kind of populations, kind of uneducated, proletarianized kind of populations moving into the cities, into their elite spaces. So, not to diminish in any way the fact that this is about race, but in a way it's sort of like race is just the most recent thing to hang an old panic on. That's kind of my feeling about it. This is not a movement that has, even by their own definition, some beautiful vision of the future, utopian or something like that. It's very much about a panic, about trying to stem the tide, and this feeling of being in utter chaos and everything's falling apart. That's very much the tone of it, I think. And those are quite similar in that way.
Well, I mean, wasn't part of the reason why it has become, I guess, more what we would perceive today as racialized? I mean, at that time, it was probably also racialized for them. It was just sort of there was a tighter definition of what a white person was, I would think, on some level.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, but, I guess the point is kind of, I don't know, I feel like this is coming from something deeper than, so that even if everyone is white, or what we would now call white, of course, as you say, I mean, back then, for example, Greeks were not considered white. There was a question mark over Irish people being white and so on. So, yeah, I mean, they definitely racialized it in the sense that they were also hugely preoccupied with the gene pool being polluted by the lower orders. So, it's just interesting that that's the first place they went to. It's also worth saying because I think a lot of the kind of younger people who are attracted to the alt-right are often people who think they like the funniness of it, and they think, they like the kind of irreverent sense of humor of it and stuff like that. And a lot of the time they're drawn in through that stuff. But it's worth remembering that, like, the last time these ideas were fashionable, it did end in the Holocaust, and it did end in the rise of fascism and, just a huge mass sort of death across Europe. So, it's pretty serious stuff, actually, and it's not, it's not to be taken lightly.
I wanted to touch on that because there's been a lot written about the idea of that, I'm just joking. Like Milo Yiannopoulos, started to refer himself as a performance artist and a comedian, I think right around the time that he was finally being sort of called out in a way that by the right even, and where he just became too toxic. But I'm thinking you mentioned Gavin McInnes, who there's some controversy right now about whether or not he went on and was explicitly talking about his newfound appreciation for anti-Semitism. I think on Stormfront. I mean, he's a guy who I happen to have known a little bit back in the day, and so I sort of followed it. What's it? I don't think I was the reason necessarily, because it's been a while. But this whole thing of it's and I think Patton Oswalt made this point. A lot of these guys are, and I do mean guys, are either wannabe comedians or failed comedians or dub themselves as comedians, whereby they really are not in any real sense of the word. But it's almost as if technology has now opened it up in some way, right? Like where you can have an entire. It used to be, if you wanted to call yourself a comedian, you would have to get hired in clubs or write for television or something, of that ilk. I mean, I guess you could also go around and busk, and perform at in parks. But there's a whole new world in which, and we're a part of it here, where you can go on and create a celebrity for yourself. And the idea of saying these things ends up being an asset in that environment. I mean, I'm not convinced when I read this stuff about McNinnis, saying that he had sort of shifted his perspective on anti-Semitism. Now I think he's claiming it's a little bit out of context or whatever, but that wasn't him just saying like, I've got to get my Twitter following up. And there's sort of this weird incentive for it.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's also it's coming from kind of online culture, a whole kind of sense of humor that was building up online for years before these guys kind of came into the mainstream, which was very much about the fun of anonymously offending people. And it is unfortunate that, around, in the middle of that, or kind of to make sense of that or put in context, a culture did grow up around the left, the kind of people who the right calls social justice warriors. The thing is, there really was a culture in the left that did become humorless and unintentionally funny in its lack of sense of humor, and ultra sensitive and, just sensitive to the point of absolute absurdity, and anyone who's on the left that I know has found themselves on the receiving end of that kind of ultra sensitive culture, taking offense at something. So the problem is that, I mean, as someone who's very much on the left myself, I would rather this weren't the case, but it just is, as far as I have observed, that, there was a culture there for many years that's still kind of there, but it's been dealt such a blow by people like Milo. It may not be around for much longer, but there was a culture that developed on the left that kind of allowed the other side to be funny very easily because it was so humorless.
It's interesting. And I would differ with the assessment as to whether they were funny, but it was easy for them to be, it allowed for sort of like the online equivalent of like a shock jock, I guess.
Yeah, and it allowed their over-the-top sense of how the world is falling apart or society is falling apart and so on. It sort of, or it allowed their caricature of the left to actually have some basis in a small, unrepresentative, somebody they find on Tumblr who's a bit ridiculous. They would be able to screen grab that and go, look, this is the left now, rather than looking at like trade unions or like organized socialist parties or anything like that. They would pick some like 16-year-old on Tumblr and say, oh, look, this person thinks they have 10 genders or something like that. So like, it's almost like, I think the two online cultures that are both small actually, but just very active online, kind of reinforce each other's view of society in some way, even though they're not actually, neither are particularly representative.
But I think, we could have gone back 16 years ago, 15 years ago and looked at, let's say, the anti-war protests, and Fox News is down there picking out the guy on stilts, wearing a funny hat. And it's the same dynamic as that Tumblr, that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And that dynamic has been going on for, I feel like that dynamic's been going on for 40 years where the right is, picking out the guy selling bean pies at a concert is an example of the left. That this happens, it seems to me, when the right is in power in such an indisputable way that they then shift their aggrievement to the culture. So when it was the Bush years, that is when the war on Christmas flourished, because what could you argue? The Republicans controlled all three branches of government. What could you argue except for the fact that in some malls, somebody's saying, Happy Holidays instead of Merry Christmas. I mean, it's almost as if there's a vacuum there where this aggrievement is just sort of floating around and needs to attach to something. And if it's not that they're ramming or jamming or whatever the verb is down our throats, some type of public policy, it's that they're ramming or jamming their Hollywood secular, I mean, I think we're going to see that rise again, right? I mean, where have the words secular left gone? They went away during it seems to me, for the past 5 years. And I think it's going to come back. It's going to probably take another year or two before we are jamming or ramming our culture down their throats.
Yeah, and their sense of themselves is clearly very tied up in being oppositional. So now that their guy is in the White House and they, are probably going to win, the right are going to win across Europe, or certainly they're in with a shot. I don't know. Yeah, you're right. They're going to have to find some new way of making themselves victims of the dominant culture. But, they like to talk about cultural Marxism a lot as well. All these kind of, very just conspiratorial kind of ideas. And the way they do it, and this particular method, I think, flourishes more online than it has in any previous medium, which is that if you're on a forum that is alt-right or anything kind of in that orbit, you can see video evidence, image evidence every day, just an endless loop of it that proves, quote unquote, your kind of worldview, that proves that the cultural Marxists have won and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, it's classic conspiratorial thinking, because of course you're not putting it in the context of the fact that if you walk outside your front door, the world looks absolutely nothing like the world that is presented in these forums, So I think they do believe, their sense of panic is real. Like, I think they do believe this, that the culture is just about to go off the cliff. But that's an old story, of course, as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think Breitbart, from which Milo and many of them, I think, emerged. Breitbart himself, as far as I could tell, in anything I read about him or any dealings I had with him, had virtually no interest in like what I would consider politics, right? I mean, it was, he perceived himself as a cultural warrior and was far more, and I think also that's where his sense of aggrievement came, because this was a guy who, more or less grew up in Westwood, of a perfectly well off, but I think he wasn't allowed to hang out with the cool kids in LA. And so exactly, he couldn't, he never became the celebrity I think, he felt he should have been, while all his friends ended up going into Hollywood and being stars, and he would just resent that. I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, they certainly, if you think back to Pat Buchanan talking about the culture wars and the war for the soul of America and all that, the right was very much on the back foot in terms of mainstream culture. I guess the weird thing about the alt-right, like people always say, why are they even called that? Why aren't they just called the far right or fascist or something like that? But one kind of interesting thing about them that distinguishes them is that they don't have that kind of, fusty old conservative image. They are very young and,
right.
And sometimes funny, and they're obsessed with being edgy, which shows how young they are, because nobody cares about that after they're get out of puberty, you know.
And I think in this day and age, I think the problem for them is that nobody really even cares about edginess at that level. Like, I mean, I think like there's less and less people see edginess, and that's been, I think, you know, the case for, you know, I feel like that was the case with even in Gen X was just the baby boomer generation had broken all of the major taboos in society, and so all that was left was like, you know. You really, to be considered edgy, you got to be like Pol Pot or something like that. Like that's the only way to get your daddy's attention anymore, because they, you know, everybody's like, well, you know, you want to, you don't want to go and work at IBM. That's fine. Go ahead, go out, find yourself. I mean, there was almost too much acceptance in society for people to have their natural rebellion, and it's playing out with these people.
Yeah, that's why I wonder sometimes. I mean, obviously the central figures of it really mean what they say, and they've really thought about it, and they, you know, they are to be taken seriously, you know, as a threat. But I mean, I think a lot of the younger kind of people who just share the memes and kind of, you know, like the sense of humor of the thing, like it as an edgy subculture, you know, that's kind of how they view it. I can't really believe that they have really thought through what their politics would actually entail if it had to be enforced in some way. So, for example, Gavin McInnes had Richard Spencer on his show, I think twice or more. And when Spencer explained that he thinks, you know, non-white, not just immigrants, but non-whites should be sent home. Essentially that you know, the society should be racially segregated. You know, Gavin McInnes had a sort of look of surprise on his face, and he said something like, "Oh, you don't really mean that, though, do you?" You know, and I thought, wow, I mean, maybe he doesn't quite, you know, maybe he's so used to that kind of horrible nihilistic vice style kind of irony that nothing kind of is real anymore, and it's very hard to know where that line is.
I think that's true. I mean, I think from my
because his own wife is non-white, and therefore his own wife and children would have to leave America, you know. So if he really believed Spencer, if he really took him at his word, would he be kind of palling around with him on a show? It suggests that he's not quite taking it completely seriously, or that he's so steeped in irony that he can't.
I think it's the latter. I think it's a little bit of both, and I think at one point you get lost when you go down that road from being the guy that, like, you know, who's hanging out with the gang. I'm gonna be that guy. And when people come in the room, it's like, Gavin, there he goes again. And I think then because, you know, that's the way to be that guy. If you're in Brooklyn and you're hanging out, that's the way you stand out. If you're hanging out with these people. But I imagine if we were to drop Gavin into you know, central Iowa, all of a sudden he'd end up being he may end up being the social justice warrior, in fact, in that environment. And you know, that's why when he sits down with Spencer, he's a little bit sort of surprised, like, whoa, wait a second, where do I fit in here? Am I really on my show to be the voice of reason? Probably not. And I think it's probably a little bit off-putting to him. I mean, well, so let me just circle back around to this notion. I mean, one thing that really struck me was these literary figures who are concerned about the masses learning to read and you know, becoming more literate. And you know, I can't help but think, and I've had opportunities to engage with Trump voters, people who I like. People who are, you know, close to me in some fashion, and I can't help but think in this one area they're dumb. I mean, I feel myself in the context of a conversation when I'm talking to people about this stuff, like I can feel myself, you know, withdrawing from my body and looking down on me and saying, just shut your mouth and don't be an asshole about this. But during it and after it, as I reflect upon it, I say, like, there's a real, like, problem of ignorance here, and I can't tell if it's willful or not, or what it's born of. But there's, this notion of, like, just a perspective on politics that seems to be rather ill-informed, and there just seems to be a lot of opportunity for people to get ill-informed, very deeply ill-informed about politics these days.
Well, there's definitely a lot of, conspiracy theories have never been bigger. So it's almost like, because sometimes when I hear that, descriptions of politics and politicians in terms of their intelligence and how educated they are and so on, it sounds snobbish, but it's almost like, and historically, I mean, the great movements have been like peasant revolts and slave revolts, and they've been people who couldn't even read. So you don't need to be a genius to be at the center of a great movement, or to do something great politically. But I guess it's more that they are informed by conspiracy theories.
Right.
And the extent to which conspiracy theories in America in particular has grown is just absolutely unbelievable. Again, not something anyone could have conceived of just a couple of years ago. The growth of, for example, InfoWars, and that Alex Jones would be this mainstream figure,
right?
A man who's ripping off his T-shirt and screaming and stuff. I mean, it's just absolutely.
But there's also like
totally baffling.
There's a midway point too. Like, for instance, I was just introduced to and then had multiple conversations about it with different people about Ancient Aliens, which is a show which turns out to be the highest rated A&E show and when they took over, when Viceland, just coincidentally, took over their second network, the deal was that they had to play Ancient Aliens on there, and they ended up, I guess, doing like a Mystery Science 3000 of it. But it is a show which gives you some history about things like Stonehenge and like the pyramids, but basically ends each episode with this sort of vague insinuation that only aliens could have come and built these things. And so you have people, and this is one of the highest rated history shows, if not the highest, in the country. And, that seems like a gateway drug to me. I mean, if you can... If the idea of like building, like it had to be aliens, that opens the door to a lot of different stuff. It seems to me.
Yeah.
It's a very strange era.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. It does seem to be the preoccupation with, both the conspiracy theories and the kind of seemingly widespread belief in many of them, and the preoccupation with kind of intelligence and education as kind of central to politics. It seems to me a very American phenomenon, I have to say. If you look at presidential elections, in France or in Britain or wherever, the idea that the person is stupid and therefore won't be a good president isn't really something that's discussed very much. Whereas, like, say, the George Bush presidency, it was talked about constantly, and now again with Trump. I don't know. I mean, I don't think that I don't think that being smart necessarily makes you moral, for example.
Right. But I guess maybe our sense here is that you guys have a baseline that and there is not the tradition of widespread anti-intellectualism. I think. I mean, that's maybe my own projection that exists in Europe, right? I mean here people win on the idea of I mean, the reason why, in my mind, Donald Trump was able to defeat the Republicans in the primary, and I think even arguably Hillary Clinton on some level, part of it was like, you're so book smart. You know all that stuff that is just clouding your head, and I can just, for me, it's just dollars and cents, man. I can just, you need an ice rink built? I'll build the ice rink. And certainly George Bush, the first election, to the extent that he was the victor, which, I mean, I think technically he was not, but it's better to have a beer with this guy than sit there with that egghead. And the Republican Party has been pushing the CEO presidency for, well, I mean, the last really 3 out of 4 of their nominees has either has run on the idea of them being the CEO president, and which is just another version of this is not about, you can go get your doctorate or your master's in something, but this is about being in business as opposed to like public policy. But Angela Nagle, thank you so much for your time today. We will put a link to both the Enemies of the People and Paleo Cons for Porn on the front page of Majority.fm. Thanks so much for your time today.
Okay, great. Thanks.
All right, folks. We're going to head into the...
You really think the pyramids could have been created without aliens?
Do I think
I mean, in all seriousness, people back in ancient Egypt, they just make those fucking buildings without help. You should watch some history. There was technology back then that could have already built an atom bomb. And you think random Egyptians are making those pyramids that lasted today? Okay.
And then
And you call us naive. Stonehenge was a fucking landing strip.
I did see like something that suggested that said the other day that like Area 51 has gotten bigger.
Area 51 is fucking expanding.
I mean, it could be, but is that necessarily a function of all the room they need for all the aliens?
It's alien parking.
Yeah. Well, I think what I love is, I mean, that was
Area 51 is bigger. That necessarily means we're getting more aliens are coming, or maybe they're
they're great people.
Well, maybe they're just preparing for like a larger, I don't know, like a larger arrival. Yeah,
it's coming.
It's coming. All right, folks, we're going to take a break and head into the fun half. And during the fun half, what we're going to do, is it possible I lost my sound sheet already? It's like, it's not like I get up and walk. I know. It's not like I get up and walk away from my desk at all. I mean, for like over the course of 8 hours, I have it. We have, we're going to talk a lot more about the try and care. I haven't been able to come up with a name, but try and care sounds pretty good, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I don't. See, trying implies that I give a shit, which I do not.
Well, it's it's Trump and Ryan.
No, I get it. But I think try
does...
and care is I have this, that's what it reads to me though.
Right.
I get the alliteration, but still. I just like GOP care. This is the perfect GOP plan.
Yeah, that works
I mean, it's not clever, but it's to the point. I don't agree with Trump care.
You don't agree with Trump?
No, I like the idea that Paul Ryan is sort of finally at the center of the attack.
Yeah.
And I just saw a story, which I wish I had found before the show, that the CEO apparently, or the editor of Newsmax, who of course is a important policy hand in the Trump.
He is a big
Oh, you
Trump,
have that.
He's a Trump, no.
But do you have the story? He's saying that Trump should ditch Ryan and the Republicans, and that he should offer modified single payer, basically.
Yes, an expanded Medicaid.
Expanded Medicaid, but all states would have to sync up, so it would be a national system.
The idea sounds actually
like
very
Cubans,
similar
right?
to Cubans. I mean, I think the expanded Medicaid sounds more like a just, you're going to anybody under like 200, 300%
Right.
of poverty. I don't know the specifics of it. He's the same guy who also was talking about like, I don't know, a month ago was writing, met with Trump the next day, wrote like Reince Priebus, he's got to go. I mean, so who knows?
Who knows?
You know, I don't know.
But it was just an interesting calculation because it reminded me of the primary. Like he basically said, the Freedom Caucus people are never going to be satisfied without complete dismantling, which you can't do. And the Ryan plan is like worst of all worlds. So here's the Trump version, which is true rhetorically. It's what the idiot said on the campaign trail.
Right. For the most part.
Lou Dobbs did a segment saying Paul Ryan should resign. It was based on that audio that Breitbart got that we're going to play in the fun half. But Lou Dobbs was calling it Ryan Care.
I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem. Lou Dobbs, he's sort of the original Donald Trump, isn't he?
Yes.
Wasn't he like the first mainstream
Full-on
ultra
nativist,
xenophobic?
yes.
Wow.
Yes. Well, I don't know if he was the first.
Well,
he
not,
was
maybe
up
not the
there.
first, but I'm
He
thinking
had-
in the modern
He
sort
had
of era.
his day in the sun as that guy. Let's put it that way. Folks, just a reminder, it is your membership that makes this show possible. If you have the financial means to become a member, please do so at jointhemajorityreport.com. Just pennies a day. If you don't have the means, send us an email at majorityreporters@gmail.com. Very often we're behind in answering our emails, but we will help you out. And also justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Don't forget, I don't know how many seats are left. It's possible it's sold out, but I think there's just very few. Okay. So April 8th, 1 p.m., the Bell House in Brooklyn, in like, it's like, I guess, Gowanus, right? Carroll Gardens, somewhere around there. In Brooklyn. Live Majority Report. Janine Garofalo, Matt Taibbi are going to join us. Get your tickets, and we're going to have like a. Are we definitely doing this with the door prizes, Kelly? Kelly, what? The door prizes, like those things over there.
I have no idea why you call them door prizes, but
Door prizes.
Giveaways.
Yeah, prizes at the
gift
door.
bags.
You go to the
why
door.
are you always
You
telling away the secrets?
You get them
No.
at the commissary, do you
All right,
see?
forget it then.
Because they're
But there may be door prizes.
they're in the commissary.
Or
Hello?
Why is that not a door prize? You show up at the door, you get a prize.
A listener emailed
I feel
me.
like you're over-promising here.
a
We're going to
listener-
have Donald Trump's tax returns.
We're going to have
handing
every
out-
single year of Donald Trump's tax returns.
We're going to have
Going back
all
to
the
his
tax
father's.
returns. We're going to give them all out at the show.
So, just to let everyone know upfront, psych. I'm sorry. Geraldo Rivera, it.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
that's
just
what I was
kidding.
thinking.
I'm kidding.
That's what I was thinking too. Tear down that brick wall. Like, well, I mean, we gave it a shot.
There is a stash from Pablo Escobar. We're going to reveal it tonight.
Also, if you buy crap from Amazon, so anyways, we'll put a link to that where you buy it, right? The Bell House, nyc.com or something like that. But we'll put that on the site. If you buy crap from Amazon or jet.com, buy it through our link. Go to majorityreportkickback.com. Click on either one of those links, and you can bookmark those links and always buy your either Jet stuff or your Amazon stuff through there, and we get a kickback. Leave us a review on iTunes. Clean up your room.
It feels great.
To clean up your room?
Yep. I recommend it.
Did you guys notice how clean it was when you came in here on Monday?
Sure did.
Yes.
Transformation.
I did a lot of cleaning in this place.
You
over the
also
weekend.
hung a picture in the bathroom, which I was just like, Sam came in over the weekend and hung a picture in the bathroom.
No, that's what I do. To mark every time I clean the bathroom, I hang a picture. So there's only 3 pictures that we've hung in there in the 2.5 years we've been here. All right, we got to take.
It's clean in there.
We got to take. I scrubbed the floor
On
6
like
fo-
your hands and knees?
with a toothbrush. 646-257-3920 is the number. 646-257-3920 is the number. You can IM us at via our app. Tomorrow we will go deeper into insurance and healthcare. We're going to talk about this bill, but we're going to take this opportunity to get a deeper understanding of this stuff. And because the big play, of course, is going to be where the Republicans begin to sabotage the Affordable Care Act. And then the question is, where do we go from there? We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.